Urgent. The Kremlin is in panic. The Ukrainian armed forces are advancing. These shots are blowing up the internet. Russia's rear is burning. Zelensky promises to stand until the end. It's been a long time since the occupiers have been this rattled. The main intelligence directorate and partisans have brought good news. Melitopol is exploding. Voronezh railways have been stopped. Donetsk and Luhansk regions are under night drone attacks. Putin's puppets are in shock. Russian fakes versus reality. The Ukrainian armed forces panic and the collapse of the occupiers instead of victories. The occupiers have been left with no chance. Russia's failures and losses are staggering, a deadly trap for the enemy. The skies over Ukraine are under control. A new air defense system is turning Russian drones to ashes. State-of-the-art interceptors are already on combat alert. The occupiers are cannon fodder. The Ukrainian armed forces, cutting-edge technology. The Russian army is plagued by betrayal and panic, while the Ukrainian armed forces have work and victories, meet assaults against iron platforms, a contrast that is destroying the Russian army. All this and more in our episode Hellpoint. Breakthrough and counteroffensive. The Ukrainian armed forces are doing the impossible. Russia is frantically redeploying its forces. Ukraine and Europe are preparing a strike plan against the Kremlin. Shock! Putin wants new territories. A tough response from Zelensky and Russia's rear lines in flames. Watch all the fiery details from the front now.
Under the cover of a possible ceasefire, the Russian army is actively moving columns of armored vehicles, tanks, and manpower to the front. Judging by the published videos, the occupying forces' equipment is heading toward the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. According to military experts, it is precisely there that massive assault actions by the Russians may take place in the near future.
Thanks to the heroism of our defenders. We will completely leave the Funsk region, the Kharkiv region, and please pass on to us what we have written in our so-called constitution. Pieces of Donetsk, parts of Donetsk, half of Donetsk. What's left there is about 30–40%, half of Kherson, half of Zaporizhzhia. That's the kind of conversation that could take place.
The Russian dictator is also putting pressure on Ukraine at the diplomatic level. Despite not having any significant successes on the front line, Putin still doesn't give up hope of grabbing more and more pieces of Ukraine for himself.
He wants to trade a pause in the war, in the killings, for the legalization of the occupation of our land. He wants to seize territorial gains for the second time. He was allowed to take Crimea, and this led to the occupation in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. He did not receive any preventive punishment when he gathered troops on our borders. This resulted in a full-scale war and the occupation of even more parts of Ukraine. Now Putin wants to be forgiven for seizing the south of our Kherson region, Zaporizhzhia, the entire territory of Luhansk, Donetsk, and Crimea. We will not allow Russia this second attempt to divide Ukraine. Knowing Russia, where there is a second, there will be a third. That is why we stand firmly on clear Ukrainian positions.
If Putin does not want peace, he must be made to want it. That is exactly why Ukraine and Europe have presented their own plan to end the war. As the Wall Street Journal writes, the first stage of any settlement must be a ceasefire. The plan also states that any exchange of territories is only possible on a mutual basis. In other words, if Ukraine withdraws its troops from certain regions, Russia must withdraw its forces from others.
First, there must be an honest end to the war, and that depends on Russia. It is Russia that must end the war it started. Second, Ukraine and all its partners equally recognize the need for a ceasefire, for an end to the killings. There is only one party opposing this, that is Putin. His only card to play is the ability to kill, and he is trying to sell the cessation of deaths at the highest possible price.
At the same time, as Western journalists report, European officials insist that any territorial concessions by Ukraine must be backed by strong security guarantees, including the potential for Ukraine's NATO membership.
What is needed is not just a pause in the killings, but a real and lasting peace. Not a ceasefire sometime in the future, later in a few months, but immediately.
And while the truce has not yet come, the armed forces of Ukraine continue to drive the occupiers from our land by force. Yes, according to the Institute for the Study of War, the armed forces of Ukraine are counterattacking and have been successful in the Kupiansk direction for the second day in a row. According to geolocated footage published online, the armed forces of Ukraine have recently repelled enemy attacks and advanced to the southwest of Kondrashivka. At the same time, in a report a day earlier, analysts stated that the Ukrainian side had also advanced to the southwest of Radkivka, which is north of Kupiansk. In addition, our defense forces have liberated and completely cleared the settlement of Bezalivka in the Sumy region. According to the General Staff, units of the 33rd Separate Regiment and the 24th Separate Assault Battalion were involved in the operation. As a result of the operation, the enemy suffered significant losses. Meanwhile, the occupiers are close to semi-encircling the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration, military analysts report. In the Rodinske area, the enemy has advanced a good 4 to 5 kilometers. The main fighting is now taking place near the railway on the Dorozhne-Rodinske section.
The military formation is not yet encircled, but the logistics are practically cut off, and bringing anything in or taking anything out is already, well, it's becoming almost impossible.
The Russians also tried to break into Pokrovsk itself. Out of 150 occupiers, only about 30 made it to the city. But even they did not achieve any results. However, military experts do not rule out that the armed forces of Ukraine may be forced to leave the city if the occupiers' pressure does not ease. But for now, there are no prerequisites for this, and our defenders are bravely repelling the enemy's assaults.
If it turns out that we have to leave Pokrovsk, then an extra 2 or 3 days or even a week of our troops staying in this city and then retreating does not justify itself. Over the year of fighting near Pokrovsk, quite a lot of enemy manpower and equipment has been destroyed, so to speak. One could say that Pokrovsk has already fulfilled its military mission several times over. So let's approach this calmly. In war, sometimes you have to retreat in order to move to other positions where it might be easier to hold the defense. There aren't any gates opening up or open spaces where the Russians can make significant advances. Nothing like that.
But even for the residents of Erefia themselves, over there beyond the curve, things are, to put it mildly, not going so well. Russians, like Ukrainians, are getting used to living under constant shelling. But unlike the Russian army, the Ukrainian armed forces strike exclusively at military targets, not at civilians like Putin does.
Shock! Ukrainian intelligence set a deadly trap for the occupiers. At least 6 Russian Marines have gone to attend Kobzon's concert. Logistical chaos for the enemy. QR drones have halted train traffic in the Voronezh region. Nighttime terror in Donetsk region. Unknown drones attacked the occupiers. Explosions echoed throughout the night. From the city of roses to the city of barrels, a war for water has broken out in Donetsk. While Kremlin officials are embezzling the budget, people are collecting water from puddles. All the shocking details. Watch right now.
An explosive surprise from the main intelligence directorate. Ukrainian intelligence officers destroyed a Russian ammunition depot along with the occupiers themselves in Melitopol. Video confirmation has already appeared on social media. The explosion happened just as an enemy truck carrying personnel entered the industrial zone where the troops were stationed. This happened yesterday. The fire from the explosion spread to the ammunition depot. Sounds of secondary detonations could be heard. It is reported that at least 6 Russian Marines were killed, as well as members of the UAV crew from the so-called Kadyrovite battalion Akhmat Vostok. The exact number of irrecoverable and sanitary losses among the Russian occupiers is still being determined, according to the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. However, it is known that these very militants were redeployed by the Kremlin to reinforce the Zaporizhzhia front. The main intelligence directorate also carried out operations in Russia. Last night, drones attacked a key railway station in the Voronezh region. TSN was informed about this by its own sources in the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. Explosions and the work of air defense systems were heard in Voronezh, as well as in Rososh, Ostrogorsk, and Lysky, where drones attacked the largest railway hub of Russia's southeastern branch. Locals are sharing footage of the attack on social media. They report hearing at least 6 explosions. This is also confirmed by the regional governor, who said that it was the air defense systems in operation and that debris from one of the drones damaged a power line in Lysky, causing train delays. But in the videos published by the Russians, it's clear that not only debris landed on their railway station, drones actually made it there. There was also an explosion today in the occupied Luhansk region. There, Ukrainian partisans struck at Russian logistics. Unknown individuals blew up a relay cabinet on the railway, which the occupiers usually use to transport equipment, ammunition, and fuel to the front. As a result of the sabotage, train traffic was halted. This caused disruptions in the delivery of military cargo. Later, it became known that all of this was the work of the partisan movement Atesh, who have been secretly sabotaging the enemy army for years in the temporarily occupied territories. And now about enemy losses. The Russian invaders lost 900 soldiers killed and wounded in the past day. In total, according to the General Staff, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the enemy's army has decreased by 1,069,950 soldiers. Our defenders have also destroyed enemy equipment. In the fighting, more than 11,000 tanks and over 23,000 armored combat vehicles have been destroyed, as well as 31,589 enemy artillery systems, nearly 1,500 multiple launch rocket systems, 1,208 air defense systems, and 51,528 tactical level drones have been neutralized. To date, 422 Russian planes and 340 helicopters have been shot down. At sea, 28 ships and boats and 1 submarine have been neutralized. No way to get a drink or go to the bathroom. The water situation in occupied Donetsk remains critical. There is simply no water. It is supplied once every 3 days for 4 hours. And its quality is such that this water can only be used for technical needs. Washing with it, let alone drinking it, is dangerous to your health. It is murky and has sediment. Or instead of water, some chemicals come out of the tap, locals complain. But they are charged as if it were drinking water. To somehow meet people's need for drinking water, it is delivered by water trucks. The causes of the water crisis are the reduced number of reservoirs due to the war and the drying up of the existing ones. In addition, the water pipeline that supplied water to the Donbas from territory controlled by Kyiv was destroyed during the fighting. And there is also heavy industry which consumes a lot of water. Since 2014, from the moment Donetsk was occupied, the Russian authorities have done almost nothing to improve the water situation. Agriculture is also suffering. Donetsk and the region are literally drying up. Recently, social media was shocked by a video showing local residents in Donetsk collecting water from puddles after the rain for their own needs. So far, the local authorities haven't come up with anything other than installing vending machines with bottled water throughout the city, the prices of which are several times higher than in other regions controlled by the occupiers. Makivka, Mariupol, Torez, Krimki, and other settlements are also suffering from a lack of water.
Panic in the Russian army, failures, losses, and fake news instead of victories. In 1,010 days of war, Russia has occupied less than 1% of Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine are leaving the enemy no chance. The front is holding. The occupiers are burning all along the line of contact. The armed forces of Ukraine are advancing. In the Sumy region, our forces have recaptured Ukrainian territories. The enemy is in panic. Ukrainian tanks are breaking through defenses in Donetsk region without a single miss. The armed forces of Ukraine dominate both in the sky and on the ground. The occupiers are suffering devastating losses. Fake news has become the entire reality. Russia is trying to deceive the world, but the armed forces of Ukraine are shattering their plans. Hellish footage for your attention.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
The long-awaited offensive by the armed forces of Ukraine has begun. Our defenders have launched an offensive in the Sumy region. The advance of Ukrainian troops is being recorded in the Slobozhansky direction. The defense forces have recaptured at least 2.5 kilometers of territory from the occupiers, according to the General Staff of Ukraine. Thus, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to establish full fire control over the enemy's logistical routes. As a result, the supply of ammunition, the evacuation of Russian troops, and the reinforcement of Russian forces by bringing in reserves have been disrupted. As a result, active combat is currently taking place in the areas of the villages of Oleksivka and Yunakivka, where the enemy, albeit slowly, is retreating.
In the north Slobozhansky direction, Ukrainian soldiers continue active operations aimed at destroying the enemy and liberating our settlements. In particular, active operations are taking place in the areas of Oleksivka and Yunakivka in the Sumy region. The fight continues. Glory to Ukraine!
However, the occupiers are still hoping to break through the Ukrainian defense somewhere. For the first time in a long while, the Russians launched a tank assault on Kupiansk. But the operation failed. The armed forces of Ukraine delivered a tough response. And even though the occupiers threw their tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and infantry into the battle, it was all in vain. the enemy was spotted on the left bank of the Oskil River, particularly in the direction of Lyman-Pershai and Kupiansk. There, the enemy tried to break through the Ukrainian defenses using 2 tanks and 3 armored fighting vehicles. However, the armed forces of Ukraine put up a worthy resistance, damaging and destroying the equipment as well as nearly all of the Russian personnel.
In principle, so far, according to preliminary results, it seems that the situation with this breakthrough has been brought under control, and they are gradually pushing it back, that is, reclaiming the territories.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian tanks are striking the occupiers without missing. In one of the settlements in Donetsk region, where the 3rd Army Corps is holding the defense, our tank practically broke through the enemy's defenses without any problems. Despite being hit by an FPV drone on its armor, the Ukrainian Armed Forces vehicle quickly takes up position and opens fire on the enemy at close range. As a result, the crew manages to complete the mission and quickly return to their position without any losses. And here we see the work of the UAV operators from the 4-post brigade. Their drones precisely struck the enemy's equipment and personnel in the Vovchansk direction. After the strikes, the enemy suffered losses and was forced to flee their positions. Even well-fortified enemy positions do not save the Russian army from Ukrainian drones. Thus, the aerial reconnaissance pilots detected the movement of an enemy tank and pinpointed its shelter. In 2 strikes, the enemy equipment was destroyed. The first drone tore off the camouflage net and the second struck the enemy IFV directly. The occupiers simply had no chance to escape. Our defenders also dominate the skies. Over the past day, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to bring down at least 4 enemy strike and reconnaissance UAVs. As a result, amid real failures at the front, the occupiers have resorted to their favorite Kremlin tactic of fake victories. Russian army soldiers are filming staged videos of capturing settlements. Thus, Russian propaganda is actively employing a new tactic of spreading disinformation, staged victories to create the illusion of success at the front. To do this, the enemy sends small groups with Russian flags, bypassing the positions of Ukrainian defenders. Some of them manage to infiltrate certain settlements and record short videos that supposedly confirm the capture of new territories. Such videos are used for triumphant reports to the Kremlin leadership and are spread in the media to put pressure on Ukrainian society. But incidents like these are something Kremlin propaganda tries to keep quiet about. For example, last night drones attacked the Lysky railway station in the Voronezh region. As can be seen from eyewitness videos, a fire broke out at the site after the strike. The governor of the Voronezh region, albeit reluctantly, confirmed the drone attack a few hours after the incident, noting that as a result of drone debris falling, a power line and the railway station were damaged and train traffic was delayed. This refers to the Lysky station, which is considered one of the largest railway hubs of the Southeastern Railway in Russia.
A technological breakthrough for Ukraine, its own guidance system and high-speed interceptors. Ukraine has shocked the enemy. The new air-to-air air defense system is already haunting the occupiers. Ukraine has created an air defense system capable of covering entire regions. The revolutionary system is already protecting the Kyiv and Chernihiv regions. All the details are coming up in the report.
Ukraine has introduced another new solution for protecting its skies. A domestic company has presented its own model of air defense. A system capable of shooting down at least enemy drones from the air while scanning vast areas.
A participant in the Defense Innovation Cluster, Maxon, is developing an air-to-air air defense system with its own guidance system and high-speed interceptors to protect large perimeters. Its development is already undergoing combat testing in the Kyiv and Chernihiv regions.
Of course, there aren't many details about the new system. The development still remains classified. However, when talking about the air-to-air system class, it could involve several engineering solutions at once. These include drones, interceptors, as well as UAVs equipped with strike capabilities.
We're talking about a platform that allows us to carry air-to-air missiles, and at the same time, we're not limited to just the R-27s. We can also talk about the R-73, although for some reason everyone calls it a Soviet missile. In reality, it was a Soviet development, but it has been significantly modernized. So here we're saying that we have already found a comprehensive solution.
We are also actively developing the production of UAVs for intercepting enemy drones. The development announced by Minister Fedorov has its own guidance system. So, it is entirely possible a modernized drone that scans the sky on its own and, upon detecting a target, can identify, pursue, and destroy it.
And artificial intelligence plays a key role in all of this. Nowadays, you can't do without it. It's involved in both targeting and adapting to different scenarios. There are a lot of fascinating things. But what lies ahead for us? First, indeed, we need to train operators and scale up production. There's nothing new I can say here. You can't come up with anything genius. This will serve as good protection. They work in coordination with the General Staff and Air Defense Forces. Naturally, this should and will work not only for Kyiv.
Another important aspect of producing our own air defense systems is that Ukraine will not be dependent on the moods overseas or the capabilities of our European partners. It was stated that the system is entirely domestic, assembled jointly by various Ukrainian companies, and therefore there should be no issues with components, repairs, or maintenance.
Importantly, the Maxon technology integrates solutions from other participants of Brave One. This is exactly how the cluster ecosystem works. Companies that develop effective solutions in various fields can combine them.
Analysts assure that this will also help provide air defense forces with a sufficient number of new systems. Once the system passes certification by the Ministry of Defense, it can easily be mass-produced through the state procurement system and manufactured in whatever quantity the army requires.
If there is a grant system, if we can provide more funding to our drone manufacturers, after all, there are about 800 companies working in our military industrial complex, well, approximately 800 companies, and the vast